Oh, okay.
Well, that will have that.
All of us?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good at that.
Was there?
Embarrassed here.
You have it up, Bob.
Okay. So,
Want to light up?
this is just to bring the board up to speed on where we are with the financial planning team meeting. What you see here is kind of a summary of the first pass for the fiscal 2012 revenue. Not total, but on the far right-hand column, your levy limit is 33,197,000. The debt exclusion number trickles down as projects come to fruition. State aid, we're estimating state aid to be the same as this past year. Talk about that in a minute. And that's the unrestricted state aid and also the Chapter 70. The state aid school board assistance number is down, but that's just paying off non-exempt, exempt borrowing for schools and other projects that we've done overrides on. Our local receipt number is a tad up, and that's a function of a couple things going down and a couple things coming up. And other financial sources are down slightly. The other are related to what we call offsets. In other words, some of the items in there would be money that you take from debt stabilization to offset the budget. Your enterprise fund budget numbers that go in there. Our solid waste, which is funded by the participants. We put it all together, and using a split of 33%, 67% for general government versus schools. After fixed costs, which your estimation is 13,965, that left for general government 11,657,000 and schools 23,667,000.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question about the first number with the levy limit? The tax amount that we approved for that was 2.5% above that 32 million, correct?
No, that's the whole number.
But the levy
The number for 2012
12 is 2.5% above the levy limit?
plus the new growth.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, so Bob, the right column is the projected. The left column is this year's?
That's right.
Yes,
That's
it's tough to see in the
Yeah, you
printout,
can't see
Steve.
it.
Yeah, I know.
It's 2011, FY
Can't see here,
2011.
but I guess,
Keep in mind that the budget number is a budget number, it's not the actual numbers.
No.
Right.
but the levy limit's an actual number, correct? That we have here, the
limit
32?
is a calculated number based on last year's approved
Right.
numbers.
Right. So,
2.5% plus an estimate of new growth.
right, but the 2.5%, I guess that's, I multiplied the levy limit by 2.5%, and I came up with $806,000, and I added to that, and I came up with a different number than the 33,197. That's why I was
It
confused.
might be off a little bit as a result of,
Well,
this was put together before the,
It's I had a $150,000 difference.
Yeah, what's the new growth number you used?
I'd have to go back and
Yeah,
look at the detail.
but I think that's where you're, that's
It's
where
a
these.
number- It's a number off of It's the number off of our first pass.
It's that,
revenue
it's
plan
that
in
big.
detail,
It's
okay?
different, the differences. It's very small.
Anyway, the assumptions, the budget assumptions that we're using, there's no reduction in state aid. However, we've heard numbers floated around of -5% to -10%. Just to give you an idea of what that means, it's 5% is about a $405,000, would be a $405,000 reduction in state aid. And the 811,000, if it was 10%, hopefully doesn't come to fruition. We have a conservative estimate for local receipts, and I think that we probably will pick up off of this first pass revenue plan an additional 100,000, and maybe it could get better. Well, the problem with that is our real experience in terms of 2011 numbers, the bulk of those bills go up in February.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to compare. This is a guess based on the fact that the automotive industry seems to have picked up a little bit. Hopefully, that's helping us out. On the expense side of the budget, we're budgeting in the fixed cost area the same amount of health insurance as this year. In other words, we're anticipating plan design change for 2012, which obviously is a union negotiation issue.
So what's the plus 10%?
Yeah.
If you don't realize it.
If we kept the same plan,
Okay, and we don't do
it's
plan design.
anticipated that it'd at least go to 10%. We're
Okay.
at 11% this fiscal year.
Yeah.
Questions about that?
No, sorry, so what, you reflect the $502,000 is with the same design plan right now. You're anticipating 10% increase. And you're hoping.
No.
Zero.
The numbers that I showed you, right, represent 0 increase in health insurance.
The
fixed cost
on the-
number.
Excuse me, on the previous page.
Yeah.
Right.
The fixed cost number does not reflect this 500,000.
That's right.
Okay.
But the FY11 number does, right? That has that 11,
Yeah, oh yeah, well, the
Right.
FY, that's our budget
That
this
that
year.
is what it is, right?
So, if you look at the top chart, you'll see that the fixed cost number basically versus available funds. In other words, what we're doing is we're saying first pass is available funds based on available fund estimate. Level services budget is for fixed cost is basically whatever it's going to be. So there's no shortfall there because we take that off the top. What's left is in general government, as you saw, my estimate, $11,650,000. It's estimated that a level services budget, this comes from the town administrator, which is about $300,000 more than that. Similarly, if you read in the transcript last week, the school budget has a $900,000 deficit based on the based on the $23,667,000, or a total shortfall of $1.2 million. The worst case scenario is taking the full 10% cut, just to show you the range of issue. Taking the 10% cut to state aid and not reducing the health insurance plan. In other words, taking the
10% increase.
I did not take into account the automotive insurance, I mean the excise tax, because right now it's kind of hard to actually predict. You can see right away that the general government budget would be short $733,000. And the school budget would be short $1,799,000. So we're in that range, and that's basically the budget issue that we're going to have to deal with.
a question on the fixed cost. That doesn't take into account anything related to the new contracts, future contracts, right?
That's not a fixed cost number.
Well,
No, the fixed cost is.
You're right.
Employee benefits.
that would be in general government, right?
In the general government budget, there is some money in the salary pool,
Okay.
For this year.
similarly for the school.
And similarly for the schools,
Yeah.
okay.
And you heard, you saw that from the time Sean and I met with the financial planning team meeting, there was a little hedging on the $900,000. The headline read something to the effect it was level services light.
Yeah, I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand the fact that they also said it doesn't reflect the cuts that they, no, it reflects cuts that they made 2 years ago? Is that what I read in the paper?
They're looking at their current structure as level services light as a result of those reductions they made some 2-3 years ago.
They were never reinstated. We're running at level services after the cuts that weren't reinstated 3 years ago.
Yeah. The level services number that we have there is based on
This
the
year's
current year's programs. Okay?
Okay, got it.
Excuse me, Bob, what was the split again between general government and schools after the fixed
Right now,
costs?
it's just calculated at 3367, which is what it ended up being last year.
67, okay. Looking at, I mean, I guess, in the worst-case scenario, again, I'm looking at the available funds. Now, the available funds, why has that changed? Oh, the fixed cost, there's the $500,000 swing, correct, as far as the fixed cost?
The fixed cost,
In the worst-case scenario, for the health insurance premium was a $502,000, whatever it was, right?
Right,
So that's what you added into the fixed cost.
right, that's the 10% increase
Right,
in
right,
health
okay, so
insurance.
I can see, I can see where that affects the,
So that automatically reduced the available funds in general government schools.
right, but I'm looking at exponentially. I mean, you went from a $300,000 deficit to a $733, and then you went from a $900,000 to a $1,008,000.
No, because
The
we also
10%
put 10%
10%
off
state
of
aid.
the
State aid.
local aid.
Oh, this is
811,000.
also with a 10%
Yeah.
cut in, okay.
Yeah.
Right. It is the worst-case scenario.
10% cut in state aid.
That's why the general government and schools have gone down, is due to the state aid cuts from available funds.
Well, you start with the fixed cost. In other words, there's a total amount of revenue, right? And you have to take the fixed cost out first. And what's left is divided in this presentation, 33%, 67, which is exactly the same percentage that was ended up with the past 2 years. This year and last. So the picture's not very bright.
I'm just gonna ask where the good news was.
What?
Where's the good news? That's what I said.
No,
Is there
it
any-
wasn't this was not
Yeah,
an
the good news
intent
is only
to
December.
show
Early December.
necessarily good news,
Yeah.
but just to bring you up to date on where we currently are. It's early in the process, obviously, but I think the one thing that I'm happy about is that the school department has at least come up and said, this is what our level services budget number is early on. They haven't decided, and gone public in any way with what they'd do to meet that, nor have we, from that point of view, but you could see that in a $300,000 scenario, we might do A. In a $700,000 scenario from the general government side, we might take a totally different approach to filling that gap.
As the financial planning team, and I agree, this is good that at least the school department has identified what the level services costs are gonna be. This is way ahead of schedule.
Right.
Which is great. It really helps us from a planning standpoint. Do you have any timeline yet in relation to when we start building our scenarios?
Well, the next trigger point, Steve, is the governor's budget. And the work that's being done by town administrator on the insurance end of things. So, I mean, those are the two